picture yourself at the edge of the Nile as morning breaks. A crimson sun climbs above the barren sands. While you remain still in the quiet, an odd detail captures your eye. This place carries the name Kemet. And still, everywhere you look, history has worked to bleach it away. What if the version of ancient Egypt we're taught is only a small piece of reality? In galleries, Egyptian sculptures appear with shattered noses and features reshaped to seem European instead of African. In textbooks, pharaohs are drawn with pale skin and straight hair. Perhaps those images are the reflections of outsiders' tales, rather than the voices of our ancestors. The genuine Egypt, our Egypt, lies hidden under layers of carefully crafted falsehoods. What if we realize that the empire of the Nile was forged by African strength and African spirit? That the wisdom of our forebears still whispers from temples and tombs? Are you prepared to view Egypt with awakened eyes? This is not folklore or fantasy. It is history under attack. The tale of Kemet is our tale, and the time has come to reclaim it. Remain with me to the conclusion, and you will learn why the people of KT were black, why today's Egyptians don't all share that identity, and how the truth of Africa's most celebrated kingdom has been concealed for generations. So relax, because this is the Chronicle of Africa. Before we begin, I recognize many of you are watching across the globe bound by admiration for Africa. Share in the comments where you are tuning in from. I'll be there connecting with you. And if you find value in this work, a like and subscription would mean everything. Now let's return to the video. The Black Land. When most imagine Egypt, they picture endless dunes, mighty pyramids, and hushed deserts. Yet Egypt's real beginning is not in the sands, but deep within Africa's forests, mountains, and lakes. The Nile, Egypt's beating heart, does not begin in the north. Its origins spring from Uganda, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. From those sources, it flows steadily north through Nubia and Sudan, carrying far more than water. With its stream-moved travelers, languages, beliefs, harvests, and innovations, ancient Egypt was never cut off. It stood as a vibrant African crossroads sustained by the continent itself. Egyptians named their homeland Kemet, the Black Land, a title drawn from the dark, fertile soil left behind each year by the river's floods. That nourishing earth fed their people, producing wheat, barley, flax, and papyrus. Yet Black Land meant more than soil. It symbolized the people too. The pyramid builders and tomb painters bore dark brown to deep ebony skin, tightly curled hair, and African traits. The land was black in earth and black in essence. Enter the temples and tombs of Kemet, and the walls speak boldly. Murals reveal rulers, nobles, priests, and farmers with rich brown skin, wide noses, and textured African hair. These are not European visages. These are faces that resemble the children of Africa today. The same sun that bronzed their bodies warms ours. The same ground that gave them sustenance colors us. And Egypt was never solitary. To its south lay Nubia, homeland of Tesseti, Perma, Kush, and later Meroe. Egypt and Nubia were bound as sisters, at times rivals, often allies, always linked. They exchanged gold, ivory, livestock, and knowledge. They formed marriages between their peoples. In truth, numerous early Egyptian dynasties were ruled by Nubian queens, and in the 25th dynasty, Nubian rulers, often called the Black Pharaohs, governed the entirety of Egypt. They were never intruders, but Africans reclaiming a throne they already shared. Their carvings portray them confidently adorned with African hairstyles and Kushite crowns. They revered the same deities, fought in the same battles, and remembered the same ancestors. To divide Egypt from Nubia is to misread both civilizations. The everyday customs of Kemet also reveal its African foundation. Farmers rejoiced at the Nile's rising waters, just as other African communities celebrated rainfall. Their deities, Isis, Osiris, Horus, and Amun, were honored through music, dancing, incense, and ceremonies, echoing practices that still endure across Africa today. Scholars explain that the tongue of Kemet belonged to the Afro-Asiatic family, connected to the languages of the Horn of Africa and the Sahel. Simply put, Egypt's pulse was African. Its medicine, science, philosophy, and art arose not in isolation but within the continent's broader embrace. To see Egypt as African is more than correcting the past. It is reclaiming ourselves within its monuments. The Chronicle of Kemet is not remote. It is not foreign. It is our inheritance. Each time we call Egypt the Black Land, we honor both the fertile soil and the black people who shaped its destiny. Long before Rome, long before Greece, there existed Nubia, a realm of black stone sanctuaries, towering golden crowns and holy rivers, not merely south of Egypt but bound to it by blood, culture, and spirit. Today we call it Nubia, but in antiquity it was Tuxeti, the land of the bow, and later the renowned kingdom of Kush. And this was never Egypt's distant relative. It was Kemet's southern reflection. For millennia, Kemet and Nubia were more than neighbors. They were kin, trading allies, religious partners, cultural twins, and at moments indistinguishable. Let's be clear, Egypt did not uplift Nubia, nor did it create Kush. In truth, some of Egypt's earliest dynasties reveal Nubian influence woven into their regalia, monuments, and sacred emblems. The builders of Tuxeti may have provided the very spiritual and political roots of what became Egypt's first dynasty. Both lands worshipped shared gods. Amun, revered in Thebes, was equally honored in Nubian shrines deep in present-day Sudan. The lion goddess Sekhmet mirrored Nubian warrior divinities. Even their creation stories sprang from the same source: water, ancestors, and divine order. These were African traditions reshaped across lands yet grounded in the same earth. When Kemet weakened, Nubia did not emerge as an invader, but as a guardian. In the 8th century BCE, as Egypt crumbled under invasions and civil discord, a mighty dynasty emerged from the south. The Kushite Pharaohs of the 25th dynasty advanced northward, not to loot but to restore. Kings such as Piye, Shabaka, Taharka, and Tantamani saw themselves as rightful heirs to Kemet's sacred tradition. Piye's inscriptions speak of reverence. He did not simply seize Egypt. He cleansed its sanctuaries, revered its deities, and revived its customs. Shabaka safeguarded ancient writings, carving portions of the Memphite theology into stone to prevent their loss. These were no usurpers, they were restorers. Nubia did not rob Egypt. It preserved her. Shrines at Gebel Barkal, deep in the south, were crafted with the same divine plans as Karnak or Luxor. The temples, the priesthoods, the cosmic order, all reflected Kemet, yet carried a southern flame. Sculptures of Kushite rulers depict broad noses, full lips, and African hair textures, clear emblems of Black African identity. Yet somehow this truth was erased. European archaeologists once argued the Kushites were mere imitators of Egypt, as though Africans could not reflect one another without copying, as though two grand African kingdoms could not flourish, exchange, and evolve together. This was the arrogance of colonial thought, driving the erasure of one of Africa's greatest partnerships. Yet modern discoveries destroy that illusion. Nubian tombs stand as old and intricate as those of Kemet. The city of Kerma, once Nubia's capital, contains monuments, palaces, and graves predating some of Egypt's pyramids. Meroe, another Kushite center, holds more pyramids than all of Egypt, crafted in their own design, their own script, their own brilliance. Nubia was not Egypt's shadow. It was Egypt's sibling. The bond is clear in art as well. Murals from both lands show identical stances of respect toward ancestors, the same ritual vessels, the same sacred animals. These were cultural exchanges, not imitations. The Nile was never a border, but a shared artery of civilization. Thus, when we speak of Kemet, we must also speak of Nubia. When we say Pharaoh, we must remember the Kushite rulers. When we say Africa, both names must be spoken. Their stories woven like twin strands of DNA shaping the spirit of a people. To understand Nubia is to understand Egypt. To honor Kush is to reclaim Kemet. Pay attention closely. The stones whisper. The walls preserve memory. Yet another voice has been doing the interpreting. If the previous part followed rhythms of drums and whispered prayers, this one studies the faces etched in rock, direct proof of who the people of Kemet truly were, and reveals how museums, history books, and photographs have often forced false stories onto those faces. Step inside a gallery and you encounter history behind glass. A pharaoh's profile, a queen in lapis blue, a funerary mask glowing with gold. The artifacts appear holy and timeless. They are, but the way they've been framed and narrated is far from neutral. It bears a tone colonial, filtered, and at times harsh. The physical record of Kemet speaks clearly if read with care. Murals show individuals with rich brown and dark brown complexions, tightly curled hair, wide noses, full lips, features mirrored across sub-Saharan Africa. Sculptures reflect texture and detail. Braided wigs, shaven heads with painted markings, decorative pins, and crowns resting on skulls shaped like African heads. Even portrayals of children and laborers present diverse skin shades and body forms. These are not exaggerated cartoons but lifelike portraits, echoing the diversity visible in African groups today. Still, throughout the 1800s and well into the 1900s, Western institutions and texts offered a distorted translation. Why? The first reason lies in repair and destruction. Statues missing noses or lips, sometimes from erosion, time, or intentional defacement, were restored with European-style traits. Curators and early restorers, guided by Eurocentric bias, reshaped faces to appear more classical, more European. A fractured profile was reshaped into a Roman vision. Next came color blindness, both literal and imagined. Early excavators scrubbed away pigments, convinced the bright polychromy seemed crude or unrefined. What was left was pale stone presented as smooth marble, yet the truth was hidden. The statues had once carried vibrant hues, rich skin tones, undeniable identity. When color was erased, so was heritage. Then came cinema and media. Hollywood adored Egypt. Golden crowns and desert arenas filled the screen. But casting and costumes created the Egypt they preferred. A Mediterranean fantasy, not its African truth. These images spread through classrooms, defining how countless students pictured Kemet. Finally, academic prejudice. For generations, scholars claimed Egypt's genius must have come from Greece or the Near East because they assumed Africans could not achieve such mastery. That was not research. It was racism dressed as learning. And it distorted education and public belief, yet the body remembers. Tomb carvings show women with braided hair, bead necklaces, and skirts tied at the waist. Styles echoed across Africa. Warriors and rulers of Kush and Meroe appear with elongated skulls, unique hairstyles, and beauty shaped by African ideals. Household items, dolls, charms, daily tools, reveal lives that resemble African homes even today. For artists, filmmakers, curators, and writers, these truths matter. The right picture restores. The wrong one erases. By fixing museum tags and restoring authentic pigments, we return these faces to their people. On film, the process is clear. Focus tightly on carvings and statues that highlight African traits. Hold the frame long enough so every detail is absorbed. Then shift to juxtapositions. An ancient wall scene beside present-day African braids and clothing, showing direct links. Insert archival clips revealing how past restorations distorted works. Then unveil originals using digital color recovery. Add short on-screen lines from Kushite rulers and Nubian writings to let African voices lead the story. The evidence is undeniable. Kemet's art and culture were African. These were African sculptors chiseling stone, African painters coloring temples, African mourners gathered at shrines. And let's be direct. When institutions distort the record, heritage is stolen. To reclaim Kemet means pressing museums to share the full history, how objects were taken, who created them, and their meaning to living descendants. It calls for repatriation talks, accurate labeling, and African-led curatorship. It requires amplifying Black voices in the rooms where interpretation takes place. In the next part, we will trace how African spirituality still carries Kemet's sacred science, from West African orishas to Caribbean Vodun temples. Listen carefully. A drum's rhythm can outlast the voyage of a ship. A whispered prayer can endure the horrors of the Middle Passage because its roots sink deeper than time itself. To speak of Kemet is to attune our ears to those rhythms, the sacred echoes that traveled southward, westward, and across the seas with people who refused to forget. At the center of Kemet's spiritual fabric stood ideas that feel instantly recognizable if you have lived with African ritual. The universe as a living whole, ancestors as present protectors, water as both beginning and bridge, ceremonies that heal and connect entire communities. These were never locked inside temple walls. They were woven into everyday practice, offerings on family shrines, cleansing in holy pools, chants that summoned spirit into presence. This spiritual framework, ancestor, water, harmony, spirit, is Africa's grammar. Among the Yoruba of West Africa, songs praise the ocean, a mother and healer, a river spirit bearing fertility and protection. In Dahomey and Faanlands, Vodun keep alive reverence for water deities who govern life and death. In Central Africa, Bakongo teachings trace a path between realms with an axis mundi that mirrors Egypt's Nile as the cosmic vein. None of this is accident. These are diverse expressions of one theme. Existence flows from water. The departed remain near. Ritual restores harmony. Kemet's Isis, mother, sorceress, renewer of life, resonates within these traditions, her tenderness and might reflecting the sacred feminine found throughout Africa's spiritual heritage, the tale of Osiris, his death and resurrection etched into stone along the Nile, finds reflection in countless African farming myths, where seeds buried in earth rise again with the rains. This vision of time as a cycle of birth, death, and return belongs to a continent that treats the seasons as sacred scripture. When millions were ripped from their homelands, they carried these spiritual seeds across the seas. In the Americas, those seeds were planted in hostile soil yet somehow endured. Under slavery and forced Christianity, the gods were disguised, their names whispered in secret. Out of this resistance grew Vodou in Haiti, Santeria in Cuba, Candomblé in Brazil, and Hoodoo in the American South. Different tongues, same roots. The connections remain clear. Ritual bathing, holy in Kemet's purifications, survives in Yoruba ceremonies and Afro-Caribbean initiations. Ancestral shrines once carved in Egyptian tombs live on as family tables and altars that kept communities intact. The rhythm of drums and call and response central to temple hymns in Kemet, echoes in West African rituals and in plantation work songs carrying hidden prayers. Spiritual trance, when the divine inhabits the body to guide, heal, or correct, appears in both Nile Valley rites and many African traditions. A sacred channel between realms. These parallels do not mean every practice in the Americas comes directly from Kemet, but they affirm continuity. Spiritual principles move, adapt, and endure because they answer human need. Scholars of African and Diaspora faiths recognize these as proof of a shared moral and metaphysical horizon. Beyond ritual, symbolic language persists. Eyes, crowns, serpents, twins, feathered wings, appearing across African art and Kemet's imagery. The Eye of Horus, a sign of protection and renewal, can be read alongside West African protective signs and Pan-African emblems of rebirth. Not as identical claims, but as a shared spiritual vocabulary woven into daily life. Across the Black Atlantic today, communities trace their roots back to these sacred lines. In Brazil's Quilombos and Cuba's Cabildos, in the Bata rooms of New York and Lagos, the echoes of Kemet are retold in song and ritual. Some groups deliberately reclaim Egyptian names and myths, while others preserve older local titles yet embody the same sacred framework. However expressed, the connections remain unmistakable. This is why recovering Kemet's truth matters beyond museum walls and classroom pages. It matters for ritual practice, for the ways we pray, remember, and anchor our spirits in the world. When people of African descent embrace Kemet as family, they reconnect with a living legacy that shapes identity, healing, and resilience. It explains why in modern African spiritual revivals, Isis is invoked alongside ancestor shrines, why the Nile's cosmic order guides quests for balance, and why Ma'at is honored as both divine principle and social ethic. Kemet's spiritual science is not a dead relic. It is a living toolkit. It instructs how to flow with cycles, how to honor the departed, and how to safeguard community against disorder. In the diaspora, that very toolkit preserved people's souls, emotions, and traditions under the brutality of displacement. Now that the doorway to Kemet's true story is open, we must step further. One of the most pressing and often distorted questions remains: why were the ancient people of Kemet unmistakably black, yet modern Egyptians are not uniformly black today? The answer lies not only in complexion, but in centuries of history, migration, conquest, and cultural transformation. When we speak of Kemet, the land known today as ancient Egypt, we are speaking of a black African civilization. Its temples, tombs, and monuments stand as proof, carved by the very hands of dark-skinned Africans who lived, worked, and ruled along the Nile. Their features were unmistakably African, their culture rooted deep in the heart of the continent. Yet, when we look at modern Egyptians, we see something different. A population with a wide range of skin tones and features, many of which do not reflect the images we recognize from the monuments. Why is that? The answer lies in geography and time. Egypt stood at the crossroads of Africa and the Middle East, a strategic passage between worlds. Over thousands of years, this land became not just a cradle of civilization, but also a battleground of migrations and empires. After the fall of the great dynasties of Kemet, foreign powers came: Persians, Greeks under Alexander, Romans, Arabs, Turks, and many more. With each wave came new people, new cultures, and new bloodlines mixing with the original African population. Over centuries, this blending created the diversity we see today, where Egypt carries both its African roots and layers of influence from beyond. Regional differences also tell part of the story. In Upper Egypt, close to Nubia and Sudan, many people still carry darker skin tones and features resembling the ancient people of Kemet. In Lower Egypt, closer to the Mediterranean, history shows deeper absorption of foreign presence and influence. Together, these layers form the Egypt we know today, a land shaped by both its original Black African foundation and the many chapters of history that followed. This shows that modern Egyptians are not a single type, but a rich spectrum of African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean ancestry. Yet this diversity does not diminish Kemet's African roots. The ancient Egyptians were Black Africans, and their civilization, its temples, pyramids, inventions, and culture, was built by African hands. The varied appearance of modern Egyptians is the result of thousands of years of migrations, conquests, and blending, not proof that the original builders of Kemet were not Black. Egypt's story is also a story of identity and perception. During the 19th and 20th centuries, colonial narratives deliberately recast Egypt closer to Europe than Africa, erasing the blackness of Kemet to suit political and racial agendas. Those distortions still influence how people view Egypt today. So when we say Kemet was Black, we mean the people who carved its monuments, constructed its knowledge systems, and created a civilization whose influence resonates across Africa and the diaspora. Modern Egyptians reflect millennia of history, migration, and cultural interaction, a people African at their core, enriched and diversified by time. African identity in Egypt does not disappear with changing appearances. It survives in the land, the Nile, the rituals, the language, and the cultural memory. Kemet was African, modern Egyptians are African, and the story of Egypt cannot be separated from the story of Africa itself.